Manchester United 3, Lens 1. Yes, Manchester United end their penultimate game of pre-season with a victory at Old Trafford as they return to England, as they return home. They get a victory and... oh my goodness me. It was almost very typical of Manchester United last season, wasn't it? And certain elements of it were typical of United that we've seen so far in pre-season. But there were positives today. There was, I think, a general better performance than what we saw against the likes of Borussia Dortmund, certainly in the last pre-season game in the United States. And there's certainly a bit more positivity and a bit of momentum heading into the first game of the season against Wolves. Of course, it was the majority of the starters today. It's probably maybe one or two changes, but that team that started, you'll probably think was probably going to be starting against Wolves at Old Trafford in the opening game of the Premier League for United, not this Monday, but the Monday afterwards. So I think there were positives, but there were negatives. Let's start off with positives first. Let's talk about positives in terms of individual players. Bruno Fernandes, I felt across both halves, was excellent, particularly in the first half that United struggled to have intensity at points and struggled to have, again, a bit of... drive. It's just things were missing. Bruno Fernandes wasn't part of that. He dictated everything. He was, again, a part of everything, spraying the ball out to particularly Garnacho. And we'll touch on Garnacho in just a second, but I thought he just kept everything ticking over for United and really sped the game up when it needed it as well. And obviously he puts that ball out to Garnacho. Brilliant pass. Not the only time he did that. He found Garnacho so often, and Garnacho puts it across goal. Mason Mount should score. Really fluffs his lines. But I thought Bruno did well, and also in the second half, I think he did fantastic too. Alejandro Garnacho, I'd probably give man of the match too. I think he was obviously excellent in the second half while he was on the pitch, but also in the first half too, as I mentioned. I think one of the frustrations I had coming out of the game now is that, a bit like last season, it's inconsistency by United. You don't know what you're going to get, not even from match to match or game to game. It's from 10 minutes to 10 minutes or half to half. You don't know what United is going to show up. And actually, Garnacho was one of the more consistent players today. As I mentioned, first half, should have got an assist from Mason Mount, who scuffed that chance. And again, that was the Bruno-Garnacho link-up. He does fantastic for the second goal with Marcus Rashford. Rashford does a fantastic touch to him. And Garnacho still has a lot to do there. He has to pick the right pass. He does. Gets across to Antony. And Antony, bit of a heavy touch, but Antony gets his goal anyway. So I'd probably give the man of the match to Alejandro Garnacho. I thought he was excellent. Casemiro, I thought, did well throughout the game too. Broke the play up, several good tackles, winning the ball back. I would also think Antony did really well. Second half, it was much, much better. And I think that's where sometimes people can say, you're scapegoating Antony, you're too critical, why do you always focus on him? And I think the reason is because obviously, look, the price tag's high, he can't do anything about that. What he can do and what he can improve is just his output. And I think people are looking for that this season. Not just in terms of goals, but assists too. And we saw in that 15-minute period after half-time, from sort of the 45th minute to the 60th minute, we saw what he's capable of. He can get assists. The pass he does for Marcus Rashford for the equaliser is brilliant. It's an absolutely top-quality pass. And for his goal too, not only does he have to keep up with the play and make sure he's involved in that scenario, but also he does do a heavy touch, but he recovers. He recovers, opens up his body, opens up his left foot and puts it past the goalkeeper. And I think that's what should be expected of him. He's not going to get a goal and an assist every game, but he should contribute and he should be dangerous. He should be deadly. He should try things. And sometimes, again, we don't see that from him enough. So I thought he did well in the second half. And as I mentioned, it was just... again, we saw this last season quite a few times, particularly in those games after the World Cup, where we were in really good form for a period of time. We would have halves where you go, Man United look really sloppy and they look really slow and just again not intense, or they're not clinical, and then something would happen at halftime and they come out full of energy, full of beans, and they are pressing and they are creating chances and they get involved in the game, and then they kind of just taper off. And I think it's just that totality across 90 minutes that Ten Hag is looking for, and that's the next step for United. But there certainly were bright spots. Marcus Rashford, again, first half I think barely touched the ball, and I still have a lot of reservations of him being a number 9, and thank goodness Rasmus Højlund is in. He might not start the game against Wolves because he had an injury, so he's a couple of weeks behind when it comes to his pre-season training. But Rashford in the second half showed, I think, that yes, he can do a job. He can do a job as a number 9 for a half or maybe for a game. But at the same time, all the way through the season, I don't think you could rely on him there because, again, I don't think he's consistent enough in that position. And also, I think it's good today that we saw Rashford, Anthony and Casemiro get goals because we need the goals to be spread out too. It can't just be, well, Højlund, we've got a striker now, it's going to be Højlund's going to get the goals. It's got to be everyone else too. So I think that's sort of the positives. As I mentioned, the negatives would be sloppiness. And this is a thing that I've been saying. I said it after the Dortmund game. I said it after the Real Madrid game. And people were saying at the time, oh, you're being negative or you're being hysterical or it's hyperbole is what you're doing at the moment. You're being hyperbolic. And I said at the time, I don't think it is. I mean, yes, it's pre-season, so you don't get too carried away. You don't say, this player's a flop, this player's rubbish, this, that, and the other. We're going to struggle this season, da-da-da-da-da. You can't get too carried away when it comes to that. But I think what you can say and what you can look at is patterns and themes, because it was a pattern and theme last season where, again, sloppiness on the ball, but particularly in this pre-season, the Dortmund game, every single goal they scored against us was because of a lazy pass or a sloppy pass at 5 yards, 10 yards. And that's where their goal comes from. I find it baffling that people can criticise Andre Onana for that goal and say, oh, Onana was chipped again from the halfway line, blah, blah, blah. So you're telling me that we're going to sign a goalkeeper who's known for being a sweeper keeper and having strong distribution, but also, again, sweeper keeper, meaning he's going to be off his line, and then criticise him for being off his line. One of the things we bought him for. And if you're saying, no, it's just a case of his position was too high at that time, why wouldn't it be? Manchester United are comfortably in possession on the halfway line. The halfway line, with no pressure on them, really. Yeah, there's a couple of players in there, but it's not as if Dallow's being absolutely harried or anything like that. Andre Onana is not going to be, I'm only going to the edge of my box. Why? Because I don't know if Diogo Dalot is going to be able to pass the ball 5 yards to the centre-back that's to his left. And he didn't. And the player took a shot. And that's going to happen. If you've got a goalkeeper off your line, that's going to happen. It won't. It's happened to Andre Onana. It happened last season to Ramsdale. It's happened to Alisson. It's happened to Ederson. It will happen to every single goalkeeper. And maybe it's just a case of we're not used to that. Well, my recommendation and advice would be, get used to it, because again, that will happen. The biggest point of concern from that is, for me, look at Diogo Dalot and say, why can't you make that pass? It was the same with Wan-Bissaka. I think realistically, Dalot started the game today because Wan-Bissaka, when he came on against Dortmund, was poor, and he did the same thing. 5-yard passes. Lindelof did it. Maguire did it. We saw it at points in this game too. Basics. Again, concentration. Because you look at the goal back, he doesn't pick his head up, Dalot. Concentration. Make sure you pass the ball to your teammate. I mean, it's baffling to have to say that about a professional football match, honestly. But keep control of the ball. Make just sloppy errors, and maybe that can happen in pre-season. And my hope is that that's just a pre-season thing, but. That's just my cause for concern. It's just a bit sloppiness, and it's just a bit still up and down and inconsistent, and you don't know what you're going to get. But there are positives today. As I mentioned, 3 goals. You don't score 3 goals by accident. Someone in the live chat said that, and I agree. I do think Garnacho looked really lively. I think Bruno looked lively. I think Rashford, when he was turned on in the second half, looked much better. Anthony, that's what you want from him. Casemiro looks a lot sharper than he did a few games prior in pre-season. So there's positives there. Mason Mount, look, he missed a sitter, and then apart from that, he really didn't do all that much in the game. He kind of fizzled out and kind of ghosted. And I think that there will be people looking at him. There's people have already decided that he's terrible and he's a flop, which I think is ridiculous so far to make that kind of a judgment. But, United in midfield, you can't go through games. And I think the best thing for that would be when Amrabat comes in, he'll push him. And if he's not up to snuff, Amrabat will come in, and at the very least, he'll put a big shift in. So I think that's going to be positive for United. So, again, certainly positives and negatives. And I think the positives outweigh the negatives. A win is a win, and 3 goals is positive. But there's still some elements of concern, but I'm feeling more confident heading into pre-season. Let me know your thoughts about it in the comment section below. And on to Dublin tomorrow. Peace.